Hello and welcome back. I am Sushyata Sengupta Roy from the Department of Media Science of Swami Vivekananda Institute of Modern Science, Kolkata. Now, we have been discussing about media laws, and today, as one of the discussion from the syllabus of media laws, we'll be discussing about Press and Registration of Books Act of 1867. Well, Press and the Registration of Books Act of 1867 is basically a continuation of the intellectual property right. So, when we talk about intellectual property, it is obviously your brain, which is the main factor, the intellect. Now, when we talk about books, periodicals, journals, architectural plans, so these things, is it possible without registration of those books? So, quite obvious, registration of books, and so the Act, Press and Registration of Books Act of 1867 is an inseparable part from the IPR, or the Intellectual Property Right. Now, let's get to the background of this Press and the Registration of Books Act of 1867. So, when we talk about during the British rule, so writing of books and other informatory materials took a concrete shape with the advent of printing press. So when the printing press came into being, so those in the field of writing, publishing and printing gave a thought to organize a system for keeping a record of the publication. So attempt was made by the East India Company to make up a collection of books and other publications emanating from the various printing presses throughout India. So board of directors of East India Company issued an instruction that copies of every important and interesting book published in India should be dispatched to England to be deposited in the library of India House. So every work of art, so every work of intellect, a copy, and that was rule at that point of time, a copy of it has to be sent to England so that they can keep a copy of the priceless materials. So that's how this came into being. So that's how this was like, this came to an operation. Now, when we talk about the history, now coming further with it, the Royal Asiatic Society in London urged the then Secretary of State of India to repeat the instruction of the late Board of Director of East India Company, and also desired that catalogues of all the works published in India should be sent to England. So not only the books, even the catalog should be sent to England, and that will be kept in the Royal Asiatic Society in London. So you understand, like, why is this intellectual property so important, and why is this registration came into being. So it was found necessary to establish a system of compulsory sale to government of 3 copies of each work in India. So to archive these purpose of bill was introduced in the legislature for the regulation of printing presses for the registration of books and periodicals containing news. So later this was a good objective, like whatever is being printed wherever in India, 3 copies has to be sold to the government first, so that a copy of it is there with the government. So it was always started during the British rule, but it is still being practiced, and it's good on our part. It's good. At least a copy is there. So what is the objective of this act? There has to be an objective. Why this act came into being? So in order to collect information relating to printing establishments and to preserve copies of each publication in India, this act came to existence. So every copy, and at least some copies has to be, 3 copies has to be preserved. Now another purpose of the act is to regulate and prevent anonymous literature in India, and to regulate printing companies functioning in India. So printing companies has to be regulated. They cannot do whatever they want. They has to be regulated. And who will be regulating them? The Press and the Registration of Books Act of 1867. So the purpose of the act is not to stop publication, rather to regulate publication. They don't want to stop the publication, just to regulate it, so that there is no malice and there is no ill-treating of publication in any ways. You should not be ill-treating the anonymous literature, the authors, or the literature. Now, it does not affect the basic principle of freedom of speech and expression. By this, it doesn't mean that the basic principle of freedom of speech or expression is being disturbed. It's just a copy is kept, and certain rules and regulations have been imposed on. So what are those? The silent features of the act. So every owner of press for printing newspaper, periodicals, books, etc. must make a declaration before the district or the subjective magistrate of that area. So whoever is the owner of the press now has to be registered. Now every book, newspaper, periodical shall print the name of its editor, printer, publisher, and address of the place of printing and publication. Printer and publisher shall make and subscribe a declaration before the district and the or the subdivisional magistrate of that area under section 5 of this act. So whatever, if you want to publish a book, it cannot be anonymous. The book has to have a name. It has to be, there has to be the editor's name into it, the printer's name, the publisher's name, even the address where it's being printed, whether it's printed in Bengal or Maharashtra, whether it is been printed in Kerala or Haryana. It has to be there. So the next one is there may be penalties for not conforming to any of the above mentioned requirements. So if somebody does not confirm that where it is printed or how has who is the editor, who is the publisher, there are penalties. Now what is the function? What is the function of the registration? So the governing authority in 1955 section 19A was included under this act, and under provisions of news section, central government established the office and post of registrar of newspaper in India to verify and allot titles of newspapers, periodicals and magazines on the basis of their application. So on the basis of their application, the titles of the newspaper or periodicals will be given. By whom? By the central government established by the office and by the post of the registrar of newspaper in India under section 19A, which was depicted in 1955. So to allot registration number and to issue certificates to the newspaper. So their work is to basically allot certificates to the newspaper, verify curriculum claim, receive annual statement of registration of newspapers and publish annual report, allocate newsprint to newspapers. Now this is something everybody has to know. What is a newsprint? Newspaper is not printed in any or every paper. Newspaper is printed on a specific kind of paper which is called the newsprint, and newsprint is being supplied by the government on tender. So which newspaper gets how much tender is being allotted. So like suppose Ananda Bajar Patrika, they have something around 2.5 lakhs to 3 lakhs of circulation. So the quantity of newsprint allocated to Ananda Bajar Patrika and the quantity of newsprint allocated to maybe a smaller periodical, maybe any other smaller maybe Shandho Ajkal, who doesn't have a circulation more than maybe 60,000 to a lakh, so cannot be the same. So the allocation of newsprint, the paper which is used for printing the newspaper, that's called a newsprint, that is being done by the same government authority under the RNI, under the Registration of Books Act. Now this also helps in import of printing, composting machines and materials basically needed for printing of this periodicals or the newspaper of a better quality. Now provisions to start a publication. What are the provisions? If somebody wants to start a publication, so the owner of the publication should apply to RNI, the registrar of newspapers, through the district or subdivisional magistrate of the area, providing following information. What should be provided? Name and address of the editor, printer and publisher, address of the premises where printing is done, language and periodicity, like is it a regular newspaper 7 days a week, is it 6 days a week, is it weekly, whatever. So language and periodicity of the publication, suggested titles, so it will be 3 or more titles. You should suggest 3 or more titles and one of it will be selected. So after receiving application, the RNI will verify the information and will allot the title of registration number and certificate. Now what if these rules are being violated? what will be the penalty. So if any publisher is found guilty of publishing anything without providing proper information, he will be fined up to 2,000 or can be jailed for 6 months or both. So provisions of punishments are also there for making false statements. So anybody who makes a false statement will also be penalized with fine or with jail or with both. So this is all about the Press and the Registration of Books Act of 1967. So thank you so much. I'll be back again with another tutorial video or another tutorial with media laws. Till then, stay blessed.